Okay. A very warm welcome. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. And it's really very good to see so many faces still around despite the time. It has been a very long day today for everyone. I'm going to moderate this last session on the EU Energy Day called Sustainable Europe Powered by Sustainable Batteries. I'm here in a very good company, a small panel, but very good company. On my left side, Claude Chanson, Director General of the main EU Battery Association, Recharge. And on his left side, Julia Altenhofer, Director of EU Public Policy at Northvolt. I'm going to do a very brief introductory remark about the topics, just as a scene setter, so that we can start the panel discussion with our two panelists. And so basically, just to put us into the scene, we are marching towards a future decarbonized European energy system, which will require stable, reliable, and flexible solutions in the electricity sector. Of course, energy storage will be a key part of this, which importance is also recognized in several European Commission policies, such as the electricity market design. You have heard about it during the day today. Also, we publish recommendations on the energy storage, and it's also listed as a strategic net zero technology in the Net Zero Industry Act. Energy storage also comprises many technical solutions, but often will be based on electric batteries. Batteries will also play a vital role in the electrification of road transport. And so therefore we need to invest in and master this technology to ensure a swift transition to the electrification while maintaining our EU leadership in the industrial space. We also talk about further on batteries regarding the value chain, when we are talking about mining the critical raw materials until we build the battery, and then we have to look into the collection and recycling of waste of batteries. So this needs to be, of course, as sustainable as possible to comply with climate promises that also batteries offer. It's very important, and this has been also very much discussed during the various panel discussions today, to have a robust homegrown battery industry. To keep these many industrial sectors in the EU competitive and, as I said, most notably in the transport and energy storage. And now talking about like the legislative framework, we are talking about a new battery regulation, which is applicable since very recent, February this year, 2024. And this will ensure that batteries placed in the EU internal market will become gradually more sustainable and circular. And this is going to create both challenges and opportunities for businesses. And with this, I give now the floor to the two panelists to explain us a little bit more what we're talking about when we talk about challenges and opportunities in this sector of sustainable batteries. I would just ask the panelists to briefly introduce themselves, and then I kick in with the first question. And I give the floor to Mr. Claude Chanson. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for the nice introduction, inviting us here. I don't understand why we are the last one, because batteries are the more important part of the energy sector, of course, at least for us, because we are the Recharge. We are the battery associations in Brussels, discussing with the European Commission and the Parliament and other authorities about the regulation particularly. And Recharge represents the full value chain around the battery manufacturers. We have companies starting from the mining, going through the special materials and through the battery assembly. And then we have a lot of members which are also placing the batteries on the market inside the equipment. So in our Recharge membership, we find the laptops industry, the power tools industry. We find, of course, the automotive industry. And finally, we have the recyclers to make it a circular economy. So that's our association. We are very happy to participate in this fair here and contribute to this discussion. And I would be happy also to explain at Recharge how the industry association is organized to try to achieve this ambitious goal of having a European industry, which, as you know, for the batteries is not really the case yet. We have a lot of money coming in, a lot of investment in the Gigafactory, but you may understand, and if I remember well here, I didn't see a lot of big booths of European battery manufacturers having billions of batteries placed on the market. That's still to come, hopefully. And this has to come with sustainability. And that's the second part, having a strong industry, but a sustainable industry. We believe it's feasible, and we will be happy to discuss how to achieve it.
Thank you. And now I give the floor to Julia Altenhofer, please. Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for the invitation. So I represent Northvolt. We were founded 7 years ago, and we're in the business of making sustainable and high-performance battery cells and systems. Yeah, 7-year-old company. So for the moment, we're scaling up in Europe, where we have several locations. Our main one that has come the furthest is in Skellefteå, north of Sweden. Was placed there because of its abundance of green energy. And we're continuing our expansion, both in Europe and in Canada. So very happy to be here today. Maybe something to say also as an introduction is that we're quite integrated. So going already, doing a lot of the materials, the precursors, the CAM and the cathode active materials, and then producing the cells and even recycling them at the end. So that's we're also members of Recharge, and we're very pleased today to be here with you to discuss exactly this, because this topic is what such a new industry should be, sustainable from the get-go.
Thank you very much. I don't know if you can hear us, right? Yeah? Okay, I'm sorry, because it's okay, no, it's because it's very loud here. Anyway, thank you very much for this introduction. And I start with a question on this recently implemented batteries regulation. What would you see as really new and helpful in this battery regulation on the way towards a more competitive and more circular batteries value chain on the ground? Maybe from the company perspective, from Northvolt, you could maybe give us a first insight. Thank you.
Sure. So from our perspective, and it's maybe easier to say when you're new also, but it's really great to see that the sustainability thinking has been part of the regulation development throughout. So you're really looking at the product and at regulating it from cradle to grave, and almost before cradle, by looking at your supply chain and having a look at the impact that that product has. And the one thing that from our perspective really makes the first difference, and maybe if we meet again in 3 years I'll have another point, but just from the concept is that a carbon footprint transparency is created via this regulation. So it means that until now, when you're proving your impact, your production impact, you've been choosing perhaps, standard industry practice, but here you will have a methodology developed that will be uniform for all the batteries placed on the market in Europe, irrespective of where they come from. Irrespective of where they come from. So it really gives a chance to create that transparency on what was the impact, what is the impact of your product, and then to allow for both those who use it as OEMs and consumers to be able to compare. So that's step one, and that transparency we find really very important. And there are many aspects, but of the regulation that are very helpful and go into the direction of creating a more sustainable value chain. But if I take one more, just to kick off this discussion, then it is also the provisions around recycling and the focus on having recycling and on expecting that when you put products on the market, you also take the responsibility towards the end of life, so that it's almost a design for sustainability that is being built in through the regulation, and that just says products can come from anywhere, they can be produced locally or elsewhere, but when they reach the European market and they're placed on this market, then the standards are supposed to be uniform for how to calculate what they achieve, what numbers they bring with them, etc.
And from the more global, like from the association point of view, what is your opinion on this recently adopted better regulation?
Yes.
We will come to the critics at another point in time, but
take the good side of the regulation. And even from the industry representative, we recognize there are very good sides in the regulation. As Julia just said, this is about sustainability. First thing is indeed the regulation a little bit define what means sustainability, at least from the point of view of European regulation. So sustainability means indeed having good products, which having good performances. So there are new criteria in the regulations about performances. Means having products that are using recycled material, and there is in the regulation requirements about that. Means also, of course, Julia mentioned very important products being recycled. That's of course not new for batteries. We have been under recycling since the Batteries Directive in 2006, but the new regulation implements new objectives and new targets for recycling. And indeed, the other point I'd like to mention is about the impact of the batteries. And one of the key indicators is the carbon footprint indicator. And I would take this example as try to develop why we believe this regulation can help. Because indeed, all of these requirements about making sustainable products may be perceived as just additive constraints. And we as an industry, we may react that, well, we are obliged to recycle, we are obliged to have recycled content, we are obliged to take care of this or that. So we will take it different way. And we will say, let's make in Europe sustainable product. What could make us different from the rest of the world product? How can we be more competitive? And it's no secret that in Europe, it's not about salaries. Salaries are high in Europe. And we know that the cost of manufacturing in Europe may have consequences because of the environmental protection in Europe. You know all about this industry emissions directive, about the permitting to get manufacturing, permitting to get a recycling plant. So we have a number of regulations that may have indeed some impact on cost. So, well, cost may not be the better. Performance, of course we have performance. We do research. We believe, thanks to members, top of the rank for performance of batteries. But what we aim with this new regulation is we would like to add a third part. Cost is important, no doubt about it. Performance is mandatory. But environmental performance could be a new competitive act. And that we want then this regulation to make this sustainability competition become one of the elements of selection of the European batteries. And the key driver for that is the carbon footprint. You easily can understand because carbon footprint talks to anybody. I came here by plane, I agree, I should have come by train because it's written on the train in France that they consume 50 times less CO2 than by plane. I'm sorry I came by plane, but this is because of time, just to be here on time. But I recognize, of course, the impact of the CO2 emissions and the battery declaration of the carbon footprint is expected to have an impact on the European consumers, to help the European consumer to select batteries with low carbon footprint. And we are open to fair competition. We recognize, Julia just said it, all products should be on the fair approach and declare their carbon footprint. We are fine with that. But we have a Smart Commission support Joint Research Center, which has been working for 3 or 4 years on how do we declare the carbon footprint. That's one of the key points. Having something which is robust, which has been analyzed in depth, and make sure that everybody implements it the same way. So we have information that consumer can trust. That's essential. If people don't trust the information they get, let's forget about communicating it. So communicating is essential, calculating is essential. So we believe this carbon footprint is a very key step to better analysis of the environmental impact of the product, better communication of it, and hopefully become a competitive advantage for Europe. You know, of course, that we are not the only one moving in decarbonize energy, but you can see this fair, we are really aiming at it. And we hope that battery will benefit of it in the manufacturing, in the energy usage, and even in the recycling, to get a full life cycle of a product, which can be really a low decarbonized product, which can clearly announce based on scientific, auditable information that the carbon footprint is low, and you should purchase European batteries because of that. Because you are a responsible consumer, you are getting informed, you are trusting the information, and then you are making the decision to purchase the low carbon footprint. So I believe in all of these measures of sustainability for batteries. I like that one because it's really technical, it can differentiate European batteries, and we hope it will in the coming years become a really reflex for everybody. By the way, it's not coming only for batteries, coming for every type of product, to look at what the carbon footprint of the product you are purchasing. That would be the next benefit. So that's what I can see on your...
Very good. Thank you very much to both. Now, talking a little bit about, I have a question here on implementation, but as this regulation just started to be implemented, it's a bit futuristic for you to answer. But what would you see as the biggest challenge for implementation of this better regulation? And here, please be very critical as well when you talk about challenge or challenges. To give you a little break, I turn again the floor to Julia on this question. Thank you very much.
Yeah, exactly. It wouldn't be fun if you didn't have the challenges with the regulation also. So, I mean, the first challenge is that the regulation has been made in a way that a lot of the headline sort of targets or the where you want to go has been defined, but then the how, the details, is still to be defined. And Claude just mentioned that work has already been going on for a few years on the carbon footprint calculation methodology. And so what that means is one challenge is potentially then also to, in that work, to make sure that it remains meaningful, what we're doing, and that exactly what was mentioned just earlier about creating trust. So now that we're making this effort, it's a new industry, so at least in Europe it's booming, let's say. The demand is going up quite a lot because we see also what can be done with batteries, like how much you can reduce emissions by moving from the combustion engine in particular to batteries. So there's a huge potential. So there all that technical detail that is, you know, not so sexy to talk about perhaps, but that will really matter. That's one. And then the next one is then the uniform implementation, both because, as we said, this regulation applies to products that are placed on the European market, but it means that whenever you're looking at what is being declared, then you have to look at, okay, you know, how do you also test the validity of what has been declared? So sort of some sort of implementation and tracking and auditing also of that those who are placing it on the market are all doing it in a correct way, because it comes down to, as in many other business panels, a level playing field, and to have for your products a level playing field that we have really high environmental standards in Europe. But in that case, it should be to help globally the production, let's say, and not just a restraint on local business. So really that it has to go hand in hand to benefit society. And one rule which has a sort of two-sided approach, that's I mentioned recycling earlier, but there's not only is there an obligation on, you know, whatever, how much you have to be able to recycle of what's at the end of life. Mm-hmm. There's another one to drive that market, and that's a mandatory recycled content target. And for example, there you can really see how the implementation will matter. In that we've set, or the Commission and the legislators have set targets, you know, last year or the year before, for something that kicks in only a few years from now. And we're talking about a market that is really in development. So for the moment, it's not entirely sure what will be the availability of end-of-life batteries in Europe at that time. And this balance between also carrot and stick has to be maintained, because such a provision like recycled content in new products that could then be a cap if you don't have enough of material to go into the product of, you know, enough recycled content to go in. So these balancing acts will come via all the technical legislation going forward, and will need to be really carefully monitored, because that's the last thing I think anyone would want, is that you know, we put the standards so high and then we don't manage to even reach them ourselves. Not because technically we can't, but because, for example, if let's say that end-of-life waste isn't available in Europe to be recycled. So there really also, if I can make a point on the importance also of the local circular economy, these are hazardous materials and should be treated with great care and attention, and so we're really good at doing that in Europe. So it's it's also something that can enable and can develop new businesses here. Well, you know, I think that was a long list already.
Thank you very much, Julia. I don't know, Claude, if you want to
I have some
complement
more.
that. Yeah, very good.
Some
Go
more
ahead.
criticism, because I started with approving, saying, yes, indeed, we hope that the carbon footprint declaration will be a support to the competitiveness of the European industry, but altogether, and just to summarize in one word what Julia said, it's too complicated. This regulation is more 100 pages. We talk about all the aspects of sustainability, and we believe it's too complicated. And it results indeed in several items where we fear that the complexity may hinder the efficiency and may in fact be too difficult to handle altogether. Julia mentioned, fortunately, we have some roadmaps for implementing this. It's not everything next year. Carbon footprint should be already now. I don't want to criticize, but Commission should have already emitted the EV carbon footprint calculation method, and we are still waiting for it. I just take this as a
it means that they're being very thorough.
Just to say, it's not so simple, and we have to recognize there is a need of discussion to clarify what we expect from this, and it takes time. The problem we face now is there are a number of delegated acts which are expected. Julia mentioned about this calculation of recycled content compared to the availability of material that is really recycled, and whether this circular loop will be coordinated or synchronized. And well, I know here I saw some vehicles and helicopters. If all the systems are not synchronized, it doesn't fly. And that's what we risk with the batteries regulation, that the complexity make it too difficult to fly. So we will fight and help in our best way with the industry. Today, the regulation is there. We have to implement it. So we will make our best effort to go in detail and try to solve all these technical issues, as Julia mentioned, as not so sexy, of course, except for technical people. And I will not come back on the recycled content. I will not come back on other aspects you mentioned. But another one, because we have plenty of topics of concerns in the future, is for example, the calculation of the recycling efficiency. When you recycle, now we have target to achieve a recycling minimum level, which is a percentage calculated of material recovered compared to the material entering the process. That looks good. Why not putting minimum performance here just to ensure that the quality of recycling is good enough? Okay. But then what is not good from my point of view is that this level of recycling efficiency has been decided after a political discussion with the parliament. I don't know what you know here in this room, what percentage of a battery should be recycled. Have you any idea? Should we get 50%, 60%? Should we recycle 90%? Of course, if my phone, I dismantle everything piece by piece, I can recover everything in my phone. All that's been assembled can be disassembled, and then everything can be recycled. So I heard in these political discussions, people promoting a target of batteries recycling 95%. And if you are coming from the industry, like me, you will say, well, that's just a dream. Nobody will recycle 90% of materials of something which not all have the value, not all have a reason to be recycled. Don't forget that the purpose of recycling is reducing the environmental impact. If the operation of recycling requires more effort, more energy, more chemicals to recover something that you get with less effort from the first point, That makes no sense. So recycling has to be balanced by the very purpose of recycling, which is reducing the environmental impact. And this should bring you to selecting the recycling efficiency and not think first, oh, we should achieve that, and battery industry will manage to achieve that. That's where we stand. So today what we are doing is indeed discussing how can we make a calculation that, first of all, respects the law. And I can tell you the number is not a secret, it's in the law. For lithium batteries, it's 65%. Why 65? Because it's between 70 and 60. And that's a political discussion, how it is dealt with. That's because it's between 70 and 60. I heard this discussion. So it is 65 because it's a political trade-off. And for me, as coming from the battery industry, it's a pity that this was discussed on this base. It should have been discussed on the base of what makes sense for recycling, what will reduce the battery environmental impact, and what is the level to be achieved to ensure this target. And this, we need to try to manage this. We do it now, discussing with the JRC on the calculation method to try to restore a good sense and efficiency to this regulation. And I can promise you, we will achieve 65% because that's by law. But maybe we will discuss a little bit more what is the input and what is the output in order that the balance achieves 65%. And that's really what we are doing today. Sorry to be, it's a bit technical, but you can understand that at some point, this regulation, if we as an industry want to make it efficient, we need to have some adjustment on the initial ambitions to come back to my initial point, which I believe was a bit too ambitious.
Thank you very much. Point taken. I have just on the defense on how in the European Commission sometimes we propose, we actually do impact assessment and do some more thorough analysis, and it's not always the case. I can only speak from more the energy angle. As we were going through energy crisis last year, we had to come up in a very short period of time with very quick decisions. So sometimes it's not really underlined scientifically. I fully agree that it should. And it might sound simple just to say, okay, you believe 60, the other believes 70, to negotiate, we just stay in the middle. Is probably not so simple, but sometimes it's really, as you say, it's political decisions discussed between member states or in the European Parliament between the different parties, and sometimes it's really just based on negotiations, and then we approve a regulation, and then of course it has to be revised, and it has to be also tested in terms of efficiency, you know. Now, talking about, we have been talking about this new battery regulation. What are you missing? What is the biggest, what we call outage in this ecosystem of batteries that still needs to be addressed? So what is not addressed in this newly, adopted regulation?
Do you want to take turns now? Now you start?
As you wish. It's a bit of a problem having two speakers.
And you can on that one. So I don't think good ideas are missing. As I said, it's too complex, but the other hand is it's rather complete. And indeed, I believe there is a lot of aspects of sustainability of batteries and potentially make differentiation for European battery industry to compete. So I think I would not say there are really missing points. But what I would really look at is the robustness of this regulation compared to the world change and the innovation, and the fact that this discussion for the batteries regulation has taken several years. And some of the targets were discussed at a point where we already seen the targets moving. For example, recycling efficiency was proposed for essentially, to follow up on this topic that you like very much, was really assessed for nickel, manganese, cobalt, so-called NMC lithium-ion battery types. You may be aware of that. And these batteries contain nickel and manganese and cobalt, and these metals are worth recycling and getting back. But now we see, for example, that we have in the last year a strong development of so-called LFP battery, lithium iron phosphate. And these are also lithium batteries that go in the same type of application, or almost the same type of application, and can take a large part of market, and do not contain nickel, do not contain cobalt, and iron and phosphate. So of course they will go to recycling, but then achieving 65% will be even more difficult with that one because there are less material to be recovered that makes sense for recovery. And so you face a situation where some companies may promote the idea of using these LFP batteries also because they contain less critical materials, which is not bad for Europe, being less depending on cobalt importing from, as you know, many of you, the majority of cobalt is coming from Africa. And so having less dependency would maybe a good thing to go. But if this technology, and also mentioning, for example, to take off another one, sodium-ion batteries. Sodium-ion batteries are very new, may substitute lithium-ion in some aspects, not everywhere, but some places. And once again, they have a complete different composition. So the method that requires to achieve some targets about sustainability, which was designed for existing technology, which makes sense because that's how we can calculate it, may not be so robust for the next generation and may potentially hinder some ideas and innovation aspect to say, well, should I go really this technology because I may not be compliant with the requirements for sustainability because they were not designed for me. My new technology is not fitting for that. So we know that Commission is revising. You mentioned that, that's a good point. It's necessary, of course, to review and make this evolve, but nevertheless, we would prefer that the rules are calculated in the way that they just incentivize innovation and not prevent innovation or not slow down innovation or even raise questions for people that want to innovate and just encourage innovation. And for this point of view, I guess there is also work here with the Commission and GRC, because as I said, there are still a number of secondary delegated acts where adjustment can be made to indeed promote having a better robustness and then help the industry not only comply with today's regulation, with today's technology, but also with tomorrow's technology.
So maybe I can add in there. So at Northvolt we produce currently one of the chemistries, and that's nickel manganese cobalt. And indeed, though that's there to just build on the point that Claude just made on recycling. So there it's a lot value driven, the recycling, but also because you know that these are critical raw materials, there's a finite amount of them, and any mining, but you know, has impacts on the environment. So once we have taken something out of the ground, then it's important to also use it carefully and try to make the most of it. And what's really good news here in this, at least, you know, speaking now for our chemistry, is that it can be done and it can be recycled. These are, you know, these are elements that they can go back to their elements and be recycled at very high grades. Of course, for some things where you've had recycling in the past already, it's easier to reach higher efficiency for certain metals today, whereas others, if you're just in the beginning of the process and you're recycling it for the first time ever, which is the case for lithium, for example, it hasn't previously been recycled. There wasn't really a need to, perhaps it wasn't much used. But now if you're talking lithium-ion batteries, you hear it in the word, lithium-ion batteries, then you know that it's in there, and then, okay, then, for example, our company invests into doing recycling and you know, goes further. So to continue then on the point, so we also look at what are the chemistries, and we have a number of research projects running on, you know, beyond just improving our own processes for this NMC. So it's a really exciting space for Europe to be in, because I think with all the know-how that we have from the past, also of manufacturing and also of being really leaders, and I think we're sitting in one of the countries today in Germany that has also proven quite a strong leadership in the circular economy and other industries already. So that's on sort of just to say that we shouldn't stop the ambition. Of course, we have to stay realistic, and sometimes it takes more time. But it's again this carrot and stick approach. Sometimes you need a carrot so maybe that's the value that the NMC, for example, has the value, and sometimes maybe you just need a little bit also of help on the way for investment. So what we'll see is that on recycling, there will also be different business models developing. So yeah, like I said, value driven or sometimes maybe gate fee driven, and that will crystallize in the next years. But coming back to so I'll end on the recycling, but coming back and still building on the recycling, what's still on outages, if you think of this ecosystem, the battery ecosystem for Europe, then on one hand it's really buzzing, and we've seen a lot of announcements on different investments, etc. And now the issue is also how will that go on? Because at the same time, in other parts of the world, they're also putting a lot of effort into all the clean tech application, all the net zero applications and technologies, including batteries. And then we're really seeing that since there's a limited capacity also because of hasn't been a huge industry globally if you compare to others. So then there's a limited capacity for the amount of projects that can happen at one time. And where will those projects go in the short period of time, like while this is developing? And here, so whether it's recycling or whether it's cell manufacturing or cathode active material production or even refining, metal refining, then there's really an issue also that Europe has now, that with other regions that have put a lot of money into also helping their industry start, then we're seeing that actually we're finding ourselves in a situation where there is no level playing field globally, and the industry is global. So back to the point now on recycling, but also to speak on just on the cell making, that we see that it's a hugely competitive area, and at the same time it's something that is being developed quite fast, because this transition, this is an answer in the short term. For example, we know that there are a few chemistries that work well now for electric vehicles for transport, and so they're really picking up the demand. I have colleagues, and I ask them every 2 months when I ask them, okay, what's the latest demand 2030? Each time it's up. So every time it factors up. I think the last number I had for just European demand for lithium batteries for 2030 was 1.36 terawatt hours at the last check. So, and just half a year earlier it was 1 terawatt hour. So it's really booming in that sense. And there we see the need also of how do you make this happen? How do you ensure that Europe gets part of these jobs, gets part of this competitiveness in the field, can keep building on its strengths as a manufacturing, and highly technologically driven continent, and that we can keep also having all these investments coming. And from everywhere, it's a little bit also looking at, okay, how do we achieve that level playing field? And we spoke just earlier before the conference, before the panel, also about initiatives that have been taken on a regulatory step, and of course that's helpful on shortening permitting times. There's battery regulation is also part of that answer of where there is an advantage for European production, let's take it. But there's more to be done still.
Very good, thank you very much. Now, going back, going away a little bit from the more technical discussion about the legislative framework regulation, I'm very interested to know from Northvolt, from you, Julia, as representative of this company, about the recently state aid approved manufacturing facility here in Germany. If you could explain us a little bit background. It was announced at the beginning of this year. The Commission, DG Competition, has to approve whenever the state pays into in this case into the building up of a production facility. We have to. The Commission has to investigate if it's aligned with rules. We approved it, and this is a very nice example of. It's partly, from what I understood, it's partly that the German government invests, but this is also the company investing. So it's a jointly investment into a new manufacturing facility. So I just give the floor to you to explain us a little bit, the story behind it. Thank you.
So we're seeing that there's a lot of customer demand here in Germany, where we are today. A lot of OEMs are here, and it makes sense to also be close to your customer. But I don't know how many of you have heard also of all that's being done in the battery sector in China, in South Korea, and in the United States. But really a lot is being done. And so when we were looking at the business case, so first we had found a site already quite early, but had this plan for the future. And then when you see the business case in other regions, then that's a great site. But without help in the short, immediate term, it wouldn't have been possible for us to realize that investment immediately, because the business case was just so much better over the Atlantic, where they have taken this very, very proactive approach to increase the green production capacity of different net zero technologies, and one of them is batteries. And so we were very grateful that the German government stepped in and was able to say, okay, but we don't want, we want these type of investments to happen in Germany. And so if there is a funding gap, then we'll help you cover that. And we were also grateful that the European Commission had a temporary rules in view also of the United States Inflation Reduction Act, which allowed that you look beyond what the normal state aid rules are, that you look at a European business case, but that you can compare to global business cases. So we were very grateful, and we're very excited about this factory. It will be up to 60 gigawatt hours of battery production also. And so that's for those of you who don't talk gigawatt hours on a daily basis, that's equivalent of around 1 million electric vehicles per year then. Enough cells to go into around 1 million electric vehicles per year at full capacity. And our plant is located, or the site is where we've started construction is located in Schleswig-Holstein, and we're hoping we're planning for renewable energy to feed that plant. And so it's all very much in progress now, and a very exciting time. But it goes to show that this was part of also both Germany and the European Commission recognizing that there is this, unlevel playing field, and putting in place measures to help. And in this case, it was a temporary measure, and we could benefit from it. So we're super grateful. But when one looks at the bigger picture, of course, then the ideal scenario is to find some sort of uniform way to also look at net zero investments in Europe in general, and sort of beyond batteries, and not just to do it at a member state level. Now, in the short period of time, that was what was possible. And it's good for Europe in that sense that these investments can keep happening. So that's in short, maybe not so short.
No, thank you very much. No, very clear. And from the association you're representing, Claude, what is the feeling? Is there like really the motivation to stay in Europe, to continue investing, or is it more the motivation? To look for outside Europe, mixed a little bit, just to see from the industry point of view.
Yeah. So indeed, we have more than 80 members now. So we have a kind of overview of what companies' perception is. And Judah mentioned clearly, for example, the impact of the Inflation Reduction Act in the US, which is really promoting green manufacturing made in US. And clearly this is a kind of incentive that gives some ideas to international companies, which also are members of Recharge, and in looking for investment in Europe, to think twice and say, well, maybe it would be more smart to invest in the US. And that's the kind of thinking we have heard and we have seen, and could already be measured more or less by some impact. So indeed, I fully support Julia saying there was a need, and there is still a need, to make a more balanced approach. We recognize that we don't know exactly where politically this will go about the WTO trades, compliance, and all of these aspects are clearly questions that we cannot answer as an industry. But really, we welcome this and recognize it's really important that Europe consider supporting the European industry in an equivalent way or in a competitive way with other parts of the world, just to make sure that indeed we benefit of these customers willing to move to electrification in Europe, being served with European batteries and European cars, and not imported vehicles. That's really the challenge we face at the moment.
Thank you very much. And from the time, I'm seeing that we have still a little bit of time from taking some questions from the audience. If there's anyone to want to raise question, critique, please go ahead. Thank you.
Well, I was wondering if it's probably inevitable, no, that for the automotive industry, for the cars, the lithium ion is going to be probably the solution, no? But if we talk more general about batteries, like for example, for domestic systems, no, shouldn't we have a diversity like with the hydrogen? Shouldn't we have like a little bit of investigation on the sodium as well as maybe for as a source of depurating water from the sea and producing electricity? And because we know that with the climate change we are already facing situations like having to send water by boat to a big city like Barcelona or something like that. So in the future it might be similar to the Qatar or other sort of countries that produce electricity and depurate water from the sea. So shouldn't we advance a little bit on that kind of technologies as well, like sodium or potassium? Or what do you think?
Yeah, actually, my company Northvolt, around half a year ago, we validated a sodium ion cell, and sodium ion is quite a broad category in itself. So just because you hear sodium ion doesn't mean that we're all talking about the same thing. But in our case, we use it's called Prussian white, and it contains then none of those, let's say, critical raw materials that NMC or even partly then other lithium chemistries have. So in that sense, it's super. We validated it, you know, so this is, we're talking small scale. So it's, sorry, I didn't finish on what it contains. Sodium and iron. So two quite common elements that also, you know, are abundant. So in a long term, that's, in medium term or long term, that's really great. And for the moment, we validated it at a certain level of energy density, which means that it's mostly would find its way into exactly what you mentioned with home storage units or, you know, energy storage units. So it doesn't have that higher energy density yet. I mean, we're at the very outset, but for sure other companies are also looking into what are the chemistries of tomorrow. Because short term on the NMC, so then we invest into recycling as we produce the NMC, like that we take the responsibility. And then if you can move towards, I mean, now we're looking how to scale this up, and of course, again, we come to the problem of, like, or not problem, but looking at the business case and having the customers for it, and so this is the work we're undertaking. So that, but lab scale, I mean, has been proven to function. And what you could expect, so apart from in the beginning it would go into energy storage, but in the future as you develop a product, you also have seen it with the lithium ion batteries, that the energy density has gone up as we have you know, improved them and technology has developed. So that, you know, is also something. But then we're talking medium to longer term, whatever, however you define longer term. And that's the lithium ion the lithium ion chemistry batteries that are out on the market today. The beauty of them is that they can be produced immediately. They can go into your car right now. I mean, obviously they have to be validated by the automotive companies, etc., and go into their cycles of production, but they're there. It's a technology and it exists. I think it's these parallel tracks of the different chemistries, and you will see that different chemistries will then fit for different applications. And exactly like you say, like obviously everyone would like to move away from anything that is more expensive or more difficult in one sense or the other, whether that comes from, you know, whatever part of the supply chain that comes from. So I think that's really definitely the future. But at the same time, step by step, because now, you know, what would be the alternative? That we say, okay, we do nothing until the next 10, 15 years until this has been really upped. That's not an answer. So I think climate change is so imminent that we have to look at parallel tracks. And we have a research outfit in California that we've purchased, and they do lithium metal. So it's on the anode side where they have moved away from the traditional graphite anode. And like that, they also up their energy density quite a lot. And they're also now investing much more into a pilot there. And hopefully they're looking at the aviation market, for example. You know, first drones, but then looking at the higher the energy density, the more it can go into these high-powered applications. But you're absolutely right. And last one on my pitch for sodium ion is also that it's particularly well suited also for warm environments. So you could really see how, like, in places like deserts or where it's very hot, how that technology would be very well suited because of its stability. Sorry, I got a bit excited there.
No, very good.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Just elaborate a bit more. I think thanks to Julia to demonstrate that the manufacturers are really involved in multiple technologies and be confident that there is a lot of effort in investing. And of course, for new products, but what is ultimately driving all of this stuff, it's you and me. It's about the user, which looks for new applications, or the industry as a user of a battery, because not everybody is, not all batteries are for consumers, but a lot are for industry, but it's the same approach. It's about what service does the battery provide and how competitive it is. So the industry indeed is making its best to navigate all these regulations we discussed. The hazardous substances, we didn't discuss about this today because that's a very key important topic which also may influence about selection of new products and feasibility in Europe. But ultimately, what will decide, it's the usage. And the very good example Julia just mentioned is, in general, a new application is attached to your new technology. And you may have noted I have some white hairs. I've been in the battery for some years already. I saw, imagine the lead acid, the nickel cadmium, the nickel metal hydride, the lithium batteries, and all of these were attached, in fact, to new development. Lithium-ion batteries, these are the products where they are. That's why it's become a huge industry. And now it's moving to vehicle. And I'm convinced that probably for aircraft industry, for flying objects, maybe we need a next generation. And maybe we will need another category of battery that has properties that are suitable to make this new application competitive. And maybe lithium-ion will do it, but there is no promise of this. Maybe a next generation will be needed. And indeed, it is this market success that will decide whether ultimately this new technology of battery will take over and develop. But for electric vehicles, things are made today. Plants are invested, vehicles are produced, batteries are on the road. You cannot change that like this. Billions of euros have been invested to produce EVs with lithium batteries, so that will happen. Hopefully this will happen. But for other applications, the future is still in front of us and no decision is made, and there is still, of course, a fight to get the new technology, if possible, more sustainable, and certainly better suited for new applications that we just dream for the moment that may be possible tomorrow.
Thank you very much. We can take up another last question from the audience. Feel free, yes, please.
Thank you for the nice discussion. You talked a lot about recycling, and Julia mentioned that the demand for 2030 is like 1.3 terawatt hours just in Europe, and the batteries or the active material that will be used from recycling is from the batteries that was produced now or like 4 years ago, because the battery should run 10 years or something like this. And so the percentage of the demand is really low that we can use from recycled batteries. So how do you want to bridge the gap of active material needed for Europe's battery industry that is not used from recycling?
Shall I start? So indeed, you're very right. Your math skills are better than mine, but if it goes like this and it's 10 years, then they don't match. So they match when you have reached stable level of demand and over time. And so then for that time, you're going to need to source it from mined resources. And then it's important, again, coming back now, closing the loop on this discussion with things like this European battery regulation, where you also put demands on, can you take it from just anywhere and in any type of working conditions and environment and social conditions? No. According to this legislation, you're going to have to also reveal, how are all those risks being handled as part of a due diligence process. So at least I can only speak for my own company, but we approach it with the point of huge respect for the resources that are taken out, and then we try to locate, first of all, suppliers that can have all these sustainability credentials and that can prove to us and how they how the materials were mined and refined, and with which product, carbon footprint. And then also working together in value chain approaches, but also discussing with if suppliers are, for example, producing in a grid that isn't so sustainable, then discussing with them, why don't you come to Europe and produce here? If you're refining, you can refine in Europe. And we're back to the Critical Raw Materials Act that we also mentioned earlier. So it's, it's really this new value chain being developed, and you're quite right. As you take the new materials out of the ground, you have to then make sure that when you take them out, that's being done in a very responsible manner, and that once you use them, you keep using them over and over again, and to create the circularity. And now it seems so distant, because I talked about demand for new batteries 1.3. It sounds huge, right? But of course, it's not going to stay forever going like that. It's because it's completely a new industry in Europe, and so that steady state will be reached, and at the same time, maybe for some applications, other chemistries will be also available that maybe have a different supply chain, like those we mentioned. So it's, multi-pronged approach.
And again, I'd like to react on your point. Indeed, we should again take this as an opportunity. There are more materials needed to produce more electric cars. That's a fact. And we don't have the resources in Europe. That's another fact. And probably there is a need of more investment in mining. Yes. But then we should do that in a sustainable way. And that's the reason, and also the benefit of the regulation now, that we have a much better understanding what means sustainable mining. And we even talk, and imagine in France, where I come from, that was not something you could talk about, which is mining in our own country. Of course, not in your garden, because that's you would not like. That's everybody the same. But again, we have in France, in Portugal, in Slovenia, projects to open lithium mining in Europe. And of course, these topics and this reopening of mines is subject to a number of new constraints or new conditions that are related to what is acceptable to society today in Europe. It's finished about, hazardous conditions, uncontrolled emissions, all of this stuff has to be very well described, environmental impact assessed, before you get any permit. But the very good idea is find again a fit between European ambitions to be strategic independence, having their own mining, and of course recycling. You mentioned that it's not because we are not achieving today the closed loop of recycling that we should not aim at. But all in all this is related to creating the conditions that we succeed in Europe, in having our own industry develop in Europe for our own purpose. And I just like to take an example because people are not so well aware. We had a lot of discussion with people from Australia. Australia is the other side of the world, but they have mines, and they are proud of their mines. They say that's a richness for our country. We have materials and resources. So we believe, not dreaming that European citizens become proud of mining in Europe, but because of necessity, and the way to do it in the right way could become at least an acceptable way to produce and our own decarbonization components and batteries, by the way, in Europe to succeed and have this strategic independence we are talking about. So that's a little bit of a vision. We have a lot of regulation to support it, so let's make it happen.
Very good. Thank you very much. And with this, we come to an end of this panel discussion. I appreciate very much that you stayed until the very end. It was a very lively discussion for somebody like me working at the Commission. It's always very interesting, of course, to have a dialogue with the industry representative, and also with the citizens, because we're here in a way to improve all our lives. We're also citizens, not only bureaucrats sitting in Brussels and making some laws. And thank you very much, and have a lovely rest of the evening. And we can stay around for a couple of minutes if you have like direct questions to us. Happy to answer. Thank you very much. Thank you.